about you, but I know that he favored me because my enemies, they did try. Sing it, y'all. But they couldn't triumph over me, because great is he that is in me than he that's in the world. That's what they did. That's what they did. They told a whole lot of lies. But God favored me. My character, my integrity, but it would not fall, would not bend, won't compromise. God favors me. I spoke life and prosperity. I even spoke health. He favors me. They whispered about me. They conspired against me. They told a whole lot of lies on me. But God favored me. My character, my integrity, my faith in God. He favored me. It will not fall. Not gonna bend. Won't compromise. God favors me. I speak prosperity. And I speak health. God favors me. They whisper. They conspired. They told their lies. But God favors me. My character. My integrity. Everything was in question. But he favored me. I promised him that I wouldn't compromise. Although I was going through. And I
7. It is still Business Breakfast on Zed, and it is the 3rd day of February 2025 in the year of our Lord. You've got Nana Safu Kantanka behind the microphones this morning, standing in for the regular host, Need Trebi Hammond, who should be back shortly on your airwaves. But for now, it is about time that we move on to business briefs. Today, as I did indicate earlier, we'll be looking at what that significant sector for development and growth in Ghana, tourism and national development is. And so for business briefs, just a little highlight, just is that tourism contributes to national development, boosts economic activities, and its related significant contribution on national development. Over the last 3 years, between 23 and now 2026, there's been quite some significant and considerable impact that tourism has been making on national development. We are told, for example, that international arrivals in 2023 was pegged at about 1.15 million international tourist arrivals into Ghana. This obviously was significantly more than what we experienced in the pre-COVID era. Tourism receipts rose to about 3.8 billion. I'm talking about 3.8 billion US dollars as its contribution to our national economy in the year 2023. Now, domestic tourism, this was not only limited to international tourism. Domestic visitors numbered over 15 million, and I'm talking about trips by Ghanaians and other people across Ghana. People traveling from the Volta region to the Upper East, from the Northern region to Ashanti region, from Greater Accra to Central or Western. This domestic tourism also experienced over 15 million trips domestically in the year 2023. And we are told, according to the data, and I'm referring to official data, this gave us roughly about 6.6 billion Ghana cedis in the year 2023. Now, fast forward to the year 2024, because don't forget, as I've already indicated, we're looking at the 3-year period and how tourism has impacted Ghana's development. In 2024, now, international arrivals went to about 1.28 million international visitors. Now, this was a little over 12% increase in the numbers that we experienced in 2023. And how did that impact on revenue? Revenue receipts also rose to a historic 4.8 billion United States dollars. And this has been the highest ever recorded for the tourism sector in Ghana. Now, this was not only limited to those of international travels, but of course, as I did indicate for 2023, in 2024 as well, we had domestic visits jumping about 19% in 2024. Now, it is expected that this will automatically impact the arrivals for 2025. But before we get there, what are the key takeaways? Ghana not only consolidating its growth, but setting national tourism records for both arrivals and revenue. How significant are these? And this is what we'll be attempting to interrogate when we get to the roundtable discussions later on this morning, and that's why you don't want to go away. But moving from 2023 to 2024, now let's look at what happened in 2025, which showed a continued momentum from the earlier years that we've already referred to. Whilst the full annual figures aren't yet published, we know that projections and the seasonal data obviously point to a continued growth. It is estimated that for up until 2025 December. It suggests that a strong holiday season with potentially about $500 million in receipts just for that month alone. Don't forget that previously we were talking about billions. For 2023, it was about a little over 3 billion. For 2024, it was about 4.8 billion. And for that matter, 2025 is expected to be a significant improvement over the previous 2 years. But for December alone, we all know what happens in GH when it comes to tourism arrivals in Ghana. It is estimated that just for December 2025, we may have done about 500 million US dollars. And if you want to extract that to how it will impact the rest of the 11 months of the year, well, even though we don't have the final figures, I guess we can have a rough estimate that we can deal with. Now, we all know that in the last 2 weeks or so, Ghana has been hit by this very popular, I say popular because it's running the whole of the world. Of course, there have been some criticisms here and there. Today on Zed, we are only looking at the impact that this has made on the national economy. The I Show Speeds visit to Ghana, and this was towards the end of January 2026. We all know that the promotion and awareness on the media blitz for the Republic of Ghana is gone significantly high. We're told that his visit's promotional effect, amplifying Ghana's cultural attractions to a global online audience of about 50 million plus followers. I do not know how these will translate into the visits that it will drive to Ghana, but I think that the guess of yours will be as good as mine. Good people out there on Z 101.9 FM and today's business breakfast on Z. You want to stay put. You want to stay glued. You want to stick on to this wonderful dial of yours, 101.9, because I've got an expert, Professor Gabriel Ishen, who will be speaking to the contribution of tourism to national development. It's exactly 43 minutes gone past the hour of 7, and in just a jiffy, I'll be joined in the studio by my very good friend Solomon Tete Nate as it brings you the latest on traffic and transport news. You want to stay tuned? We'll be right back.
This is the pre-boarding announcement for flight 3728.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engines running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
This is Business Breakfast on Zed 101.9 FM.
All right, I've got I've got Solomon Tetenate in the studios at this particular moment. It's exactly 45 minutes gone past the hour of 7, and it is time for Transport Today. Good morning, Solomon.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
By the grace of God.
I see you looking pretty sharp this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank
what
you.
do you have for us for Transport Today?
All right, so it's time for Transport Today. I'll be taking you through the local flight schedules for today. I will be looking at the traffic situation in town and also some stories actually trending this morning in the aviation sector. But let me start with the flight schedules, and I'm starting with Passion Air Accra to Kumasi. So Passion Air Accra to Kumasi morning flights are 6:20 a.m. and 11:20 a.m. 6:20 a.m. and 11:20 a.m. Afternoon flight, there's no afternoon flight for Passion Air Accra to Kumasi today, and so we should take note of that. But evening flights are 7:20 p.m. and 7:50 p.m. 7:20 p.m. and 7:50 p.m. and it takes 40 minutes to get to your destination. Accra to Takoradi Passion Air morning flight is at 8:50 a.m. and then afternoon flight is at 4:20 p.m. Morning flight 8:50 a.m. and then afternoon flight is at 4:20 p.m. There's no evening flight for Accra to Takoradi Passion Air, and it takes 50 minutes to get to your destination. Now, Accra to Sunyani Passion Air has only one flight available for the day, and it's at 9:30 a.m. 9:30 a.m. and it takes 1 hour to get to your destination. Accra to Wa, usually on Tuesdays there's no flight for Passion Air Accra to Wa, and so we should take note of that. So there's no flight today for Accra to Wa. Now, Accra to Tamale Passion Air morning flight is at 6 a.m. and then afternoon flights are 12:20 p.m. and 4 p.m. Morning flight 6 a.m. and then afternoon flights are 12:20 p.m. and 4 p.m. and it takes 1 hour 20 minutes to get to your destination. So these are the schedule for Passion Air. Now let's look at Africa World Airlines, how their schedule also looks like today. So Africa World Airlines Accra to Kumasi morning schedules are 6:20 a.m., 8:40 a.m. and 9:40 a.m. 6:20 a.m., 8:40 a.m. and 9:40 a.m. Afternoon schedules or afternoon flights are 2:10 p.m. and 3:10 p.m. 2:10 p.m. and 3:10 p.m. and then the evening flight is at 7 p.m. and it takes 40 minutes to get to your destination. Now, Accra to Takoradi Africa World Airlines morning flight is at 6:40 a.m. and then afternoon flights are 12:20 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. 12:20 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. and it takes 40 minutes as well to get to your destination. Now, Accra to Tamale Africa World Airlines Accra to Tamale morning schedules or morning flights are 6:30 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. 6:30 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. and then afternoon flights are 12:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. 12:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. So these are the local flight schedules for today. Now let's look at the traffic situation in town, and today I'm coming to you from Achimota. Currently there's massive traffic on the stretch, Achimota stretch, and I mean from Achimota Mall to Achimota Old Station bus stop. There's massive traffic on that stretch, so you should take note of that. So if you're coming from Ofankor or if you're coming from Sapeman or any of these environs and you are using the Achimota road, you are going to experience traffic right from the mall all the way to Achimota Old Station bus stop, so you should take note of that. And also there's also traffic spotted at where the Achimota Forest is, and that's the Achimota Forest Road. There's massive traffic on that stretch at where the GH Media School is located, so you should also take note of that if you are using that stretch. And so that's the traffic update for you around that area. Now let's come to Kasua Road. If you are from Kasua, you are going to also experience traffic coming to La Paz, and the traffic actually starts from where the West Hills Mall is located. The traffic starts from that area past Tetegu Junction all the way to Malam Junction, so you should take note of that if you are using the Kasua Road heading towards Malam, Awoshi or La Paz. And also coming to Awoshi, or talking of Awoshi, there's also traffic spotted on the Enya Awoshi Road at where the Ash Foam Depot is located. So you should also take note of that. If you are using the Enya Awoshi Road, there's massive traffic on that stretch as we speak. And so that's the traffic update for you. And also there's traffic at La Paz, where the Papaya fast food is located. There's massive traffic. The traffic actually starts from where the St. Michael Specialist Hospital is located, past the Speed Up Express La Paz site, all the way to Papaya fast food at La Paz. So you should also take note of that if you are at La Paz or using the La Paz stretch. So that's the traffic update for you today. Now let's come to Accra. On the Independence Avenue, there's also massive traffic on that stretch on the Independence Avenue, right from Sankara heading towards Rich Roundabout. And the traffic actually starts from where the Accra Ghana Temple, past Zenith Bank head office, past MTN Ghana. You are going to experience massive traffic on the stretch, so you should also take note of that. So that's the traffic update. Now let's look at some stories trending in the aviation sector. So Condor has announced temporary changes in its Frankfurt, Milan, Malpensa route, affecting travelers between March 15 and March 9, 2026. So the airline stated that these adjustments are necessary due to runway maintenance at Milan Malpensa Airport, which is expected to reduce the airport's capacity by 50%. So as a result, flight operations will be temporarily altered and passengers may experience disruptions during this period. So maintenance works scheduled for completion by early May 2026 will result in significant changes in Condor's usual flight schedule. So while the airlines is making effort to minimize the serious issues that they face on their runway, and also a serious aviation safety concern has been brought into focus in the United States following a pressurization malfunction aboard a United Airlines Boeing 737-700 operating a domestic route between San Antonio International Airport and Chicago O'Hare International Airport. So during the initial moment after departure, passengers were subjected to intense physical discomfort when the aircraft cabin failed to pressurize as designed. Although the flight remained below altitudes that would trigger emergency oxygen mask deployment, the effects inside the cabin were immediate and distressing. So severe headache pressure, acute air pain, and widespread confusion were reported, underscoring how even low altitude pressurization anomalies can significantly impact passengers' well-being. So these are the stories trending in the aviation sector this morning, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Solomon, for those wonderful information coming from the world of transport and traffic. But Solomon, may I find out, have you been in the air whenever there's been some kind of turbulence, or you talking about pressure?
I have not experienced that.
You haven't?
Yes, please.
But you know some people who have experienced that.
Oh, yes, I've heard of a lot.
You know,
of
in my village, we don't travel that much, and there have been a few occasions where I've been in the air, you know, on very long distance trips, and there's been severe turbulence, and I tell you, it's not been comfortable at all.
Wow.
I need to try and get you into the air one of these days. I don't pray for turbulence, but I mean, when they do happen, you just have to keep your control, you know. But before we continue, Solomon, I've got two fundamental comments here. Looking at traffic situation, and I hear you always giving excellent, you know, traffic updates and stuff like that. And I see the one from the Tema, you know, highway coming into Accra, the Accra Mall, you know, point, looking at the Oyarifa down to, you know, the Tetekwashi, Medina area, looking at Kaswa coming into Accra and all that. I mean, how do we help? Obviously, it's about too many vehicles getting onto the same roads that we have. What do you think that government can do to, you know, sort of bring this kind of situation?
All right. So I think that with the vehicles, we cannot reduce them because now and then we are all buying vehicles, so we are all buying cars and all that.
But you know that in other jurisdictions, based on the kind of registration you have, certain vehicles are regulated. You know, you have a certain number. You don't come to town, let's say, on Monday. Others will come on Tuesday and stuff like that. So I think there are some kind of strategies that we can put in place that would ease it a little bit. But I see that you are going for probably road expansion and probably fixing the road network as well.
And also working on our our traffic indicator, because there are some of the traffic lights that are not even working, and this also causes this traffic that we see in town. So if we are able to monitor all the traffics and be sure that they are working. This morning at just here American House, the traffic wasn't working, and you could see that it was creating a whole lot of things. So I think we should be able to monitor the traffics and also know whether they are working well. If there are some maintenance that we need to do, we should also work on them so that we will avoid this kind of traffic that we experience.
That obviously is a conversation that we probably should have on a good day, because then I know that the Ghana Police Service has been doing quite some supportive work when it comes to situations like that. But the fundamental question here is that if traffic lights are able to control them, and we don't keep them functioning, and then we have to go and call on the police service to now come and play the role of the traffic system, I think there is something that is a little bit disconnected from what is expected to happen. Is that right?
Yeah,
but on the same traffic, just before you go, Solomon, you don't give us alternative routes. You see, there are certain specific areas where when traffic gets choked on the main roads, there are, the trot people. Sometimes, when you want to take a bit of a bet, you can follow some trot drivers, and then they take you through some of the, but the danger is that you could be ending up in somebody's, coop, one day if you don't know exactly where you're going. So I think that we should look at some of these alternative routes. And that's why if you are listening to us this morning, we're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. If you are caught up in traffic, you want to share with us what alternative routes there are, so we can share it with other listeners who are all live on Z101.9 FM. This is your business. It is your lifestyle. It is your leisure. And of course, business platform. Never stay away from Z. You can share with us if you have any WhatsApp message you want to send to us. It's on 0544 321-019. And of course, you can also reach us via 0303956641. You can always check Z. The morning show, the Business Breakfast Show, is always streamed live on Facebook and on YouTube. But you can reach us on other programs on Instagram, on Facebook, on X, on ZFMGH. And if you go to TikTok and YouTube, Z Multimedia. And of course, you can always reach us on our website on www.zmultimedia.com. It's 57 minutes. We just got 3 minutes to the top of the hour. Solomon, on the news headlines this morning, I'm told that Air Tanzania is making an entry into Ghana. How do you place this within the trade and tourism prospects of Ghana, and for that matter, Africa? I'm looking at AFCFTA.
All right, so I think it's a very big win for Ghana, and I think listening to the Minister of Transport the last time, he mentioned that the processes in terms of regulatory and all those necessary documentation that they need to do is actually in line, and they are almost done with everything. So it's a big win. I think that it's going to also connect us in this Africa continent, and it's going to help all of us to be able to have that kind of relationship with other African countries. And so I think it's a big win, and I appreciate the effort that the government has put in place for them to be able to come back and work with us.
Open up Africa's airways so that we can freely move to our neighboring countries, trade, tour, do business. In fact, make sure that Africa is doing something on its own before we connect ourselves to the world. We need to be connected to the world, but it is also equally and probably much more important that our airwaves in Africa are opened up to facilitate trade and general business. That's how I say thank you to you, Solomon Tetenate, for transport today. And good people out there, in just 1 minute will be 8 o'clock, and we'll be moving on to market trends. But before we get there, a spot of music for you. You don't want to go away. This is Z101.9 FM, your lifestyle, leisure, and business platform. progress by Dinah Hamilton, and actually work in progress right in the studios of Z101.9 FM. This is your lifestyle, leisure, and business radio. You do not want to stay away, and you can trace us on YouTube and on Facebook as we stream live onto you. And you can contribute on WhatsApp line 0544321019 0303956641. And you can share whatever you have this morning. We are looking at market trends with Emmanuel Boateng, our in-house economic analyst, and we're looking at the productivity of the petroleum sector. We all know that petroleum contributes quite significantly to the national economy, and for a while now, I think that the report that has come out over the second half of the year 2025 has raised some questions, and that's what Emmanuel Boateng will be seeking to speak to us in just a jiffy. I want to believe that Emmanuel is on the line. Good morning, Emmanuel.
Good morning, Nana.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. I believe you are doing good too.
God has been very good, just as God has been good to Ghana and the whole of Africa and the rest of the world. I was hoping to see you in the studio. When are you joining me, Emmanuel?
In the nearest possible time.
Where that economically means?
Well, it doesn't have an economic interpretation.
And so what kind of interpretation would you give to that?
Perhaps a social one.
It's a social one, not a political one. So it's not economic, it's not political, it's social. You would have to give us the details to this. But obviously today we're looking at revenues, and I'm talking about petroleum revenues. We have seen the report that has come out as talking about, some accountability issues on petroleum revenues for the second half of the year 2025. Can you give us a general overview of what this report says?
Thank you. And good morning to all our cherished listeners. I think that the discussion we are about to have is one that we have to emphasize greatly. And I say so because when you read the Petroleum Revenue Act 2011, specifically Act 815 and Act 893, in fact, including Act 1138 as amended, the Petroleum Holding Fund and the Ghana Petroleum Funds were both established under these acts or by these acts. And in accordance with the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, Section 28, 1 and 2, the Bank of Ghana is actually required by law to report on the performance and activities of our Petroleum Holding Fund and Ghana Petroleum Funds for the second half of the year. So this report is statutory. It's something that the central bank is supposed to do for each of the house of every year. And this morning, we are getting into the second half of 2025, specifically from July through to December 2025. What happened with the management, the revenue management of our petroleum as a country? So that is briefly what the overview of this discussion is.
Excellent, and I think that that's quite a great overview there. We'll definitely be getting into the details of it. But, as a student of law, Emmanuel, I'm always interested when you're talking about the regulatory framework within which some of these policies are carved out. You mentioned two different acts, including an amended act that underwrites the holding fund and the Ghana Petroleum Fund. Can you please, very briefly, just quickly go over these two regulatory, pieces of documents? Yes.
So the first one is the Petroleum Holding Fund. Okay. You mean the Act? So is the Petroleum Revenue Management Act of 2011, Act 815, then Petroleum Revenue Management Act 893, and then Act 1138 as amended. So three different acts. govern the petroleum holding and then a petroleum fund.
Excellent. And the highlights of these three acts, I know that they would be speaking specifically to various areas that concern how these funds will be managed and all that. But how would you speak to each one of them, and how do they support in providing the framework for the holding fund and the petroleum fund as well? How does each one of these regulatory pieces, speak to these two funds?
Okay. So the Act 815 of 2011 actually established the Petroleum Holding Fund at the Bank of Ghana, and it provides the legal framework for collecting, for managing and disbursing our petroleum revenues. That is one of the things it does. It also ensures that there is transparency and accountability in petroleum revenue use, and it mandates reporting and auditing of our petroleum revenue flows. And it has created the basis for the Ghana Petroleum Fund. So we have Ghana Stabilization Fund, which is to cushion the economy against any revenue volatility. So the basis for the Ghana Stabilization Fund is the Ghana Petroleum Revenue Management Act. And then it is also the basis for the Ghana Heritage Fund. As the stabilization fund cushions the economy against any revenue volatility, the Heritage Fund saves some money for us for future generations. And these two are under Act 815, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act.
Okay.
When we come to Act 893 of 2015, which was an amendment to Act 815, what Act 893 did was to strengthen the fiscal responsibility and oversight mechanisms. So it revised rules on how petroleum revenues are allocated between the Petroleum Heritage Fund, the Ghana Stabilization Fund, and the Ghana Heritage Fund, and the annual budget funding amount, what we call the APFA. So the amendment to Act 815, which is Act 893 of 2015, revised the rules on how the revenues are allocated between Petroleum Heritage Fund, Ghana Stabilization Fund, and Ghana Heritage Fund, and how your annual budgeting funding amount should be. And by extension, it also enhanced reporting requirements for the Bank of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance. And in so doing, it has improved clarity on investment guidelines for the Ghana Petroleum Fund, because at this point you note that there are a number of the funds.
All right.
So, and then finally, the final one is Act 1138 of 2020, just about 5 or 6 years ago, which was further amended. Which amended the 893. Now, it updated provisions so that it can reflect evolving fiscal and economic realities. Because as we know, things have not been really static. Things keep on changing, both in the global environment and even within the Ghanaian financial ecosystem. And so there was that need to have a provision that would mirror this evolving fiscal and economic reality of ours. And it also adjusted ceilings and rules for transfers into the Stabilization and Heritage Funds, and introduced some stricter compliance and monitoring mechanisms. Otherwise, if we are not careful, for instance, the Heritage Fund perhaps may just exist on paper, but the future generations may not have anything when their time comes. And it also reinforced transparency, among other things. So essentially, these are what the three acts speak to. And when we look at the Section 2801, what it is saying is that it requires the Bank of Ghana to publish the reports on the performance of our petroleum holding funds and the Ghana Petroleum Fund. So that section requires them to publish that report, and the reports were published on the 2nd of February. So you can understand why it is statutory. It is mandated of them to do so. And the Section 28.2 actually specifies that the report must cover activities, they must cover inflows, they must cover outflows, and investment performance for each half-year period. And so in this report, there is a report on activities, there is a report on inflows, there is a report on outflows, and the performance of our investments for the second half of 2025. And
Wonderful.
the Bank of Ghana, yes, was to do this. And so that's what we are about this morning.
Excellent, Emmanuel. I think that this is a very good framework that has been provided for us to have the discussion this morning. But what I gather from you is that for the Revenue Management Act of our petroleum in Ghana, at least 3 pieces of legislations have been put in place. The first one being Act 815 of 2011, which was so amended in 2015, Act 893 of 2015, and then finally, we've got Act 1138 of 2020, all in ensuring that our petroleum revenue is very well managed, collected very responsibly, and disbursed for the development of Ghana. I think this is what is bringing our discussions on market trends this morning within the perspective that is required. Emmanuel, now we are looking at the second half of the year 2025. Just before you go into the details of that, how would you compare that of the first half to that of the second half?
So generally, the bottom line is such that there has been significant improvement. What we saw in the first half was good. I wouldn't say that was not so good. It was good. But when you look at the last half, which we'll be getting into, what you will notice that the performance has been better. You know, the Petroleum Holding Fund received a total amount of about 198 million US dollars from lifting proceeds in the second half of the year, compared to the 369.25 million in the second half of the previous year. So the comparison in the report compares the second half of 2025 to the second half of 2024. So if we compare it to 2024, what we notice is that 2024 was better than 2025 in terms of the second half performance.
Now, can you go over those figures again? Let's look at that of the second half of 2024 and then putting it within the comparison framework of 2025.
All right. So this is about crude oil lifting. Crude oil lifting. Now, in 2025, the second half of 2025, we received a total amount of 198.25 million United States dollars. And then in 2024, for the same period, we received $369.25 million. So those are the figures between those two periods.
Okay, that's fine. So now, you know, Emmanuel, that there have been a few questions about some of the revenue that were expected and all that. I mean, the report highlights the case of the delayed 60 million US dollars cargo, you know, from the 10 fields, the 25th cargo. It also talks about the 46% year-on-year revenue drop. It talks about the sustainability of the stabilization fund cap and a few other things. Let's start with that of the delayed 60 million cargo expected revenue in November of 2025. What is the situation and what must have accounted for the kind of situation that we have?
Thank you very much. And I think that is an excellent question to start with. Now, the 10 fields 25th cargo, so that is the name for that specific cargo. It's called 10 fields 25th cargo. It was worth $60.79 million and was due on 16th November 2025. Very important. The date is very important because whenever there is forex involved and it has to do with oil, if you miss dates, there are implications for that because of the nature of the exchange rate, among other things, and of course even the demand for the oil itself. Now, but we closed the year without receiving this 60.79 million. We're supposed to receive it on the 16th of November, but we didn't get it at all. And the year 2025 came to an end. Now that's over 45 days of delay on a hard currency payment during our peak foreign exchange demand season in December 2025. And that is a serious matter. You see, from a cash flow management perspective, it is very significant. At current money market rates, the time value cost of this delay is approximately $500,000. But a deeper question then arises. What caused this delay? And in international trade, crude trading, actually such delays typically signal either lifting disputes, that is disagreement over volume or quality, or sometimes even counterparty settlement failure. And so it could be any of these two, or even both. And the Bank of Ghana's report, and that is why I am a bit concerned, the Bank of Ghana's report doesn't specify whether this there are some late penalties and all of that for this. It doesn't. But it should be clear on what, one, led to that, and two, what, as it were, sanctions or what is going to happen about that. And in practice, standard crude sale contracts typically include these provisions precisely for scenarios like this. And Ghanaians deserve to know, did we recover the time value of our money, or it was completely waived? And that is the point of concern that I am coming from. Did we receive that $500,000 in the delayed receipt, or it was waived? And it is important that we know this, because this will have implications for us.
I just cannot agree with you more, Emmanuel. And that's why I was very particular when I tried to situate the discussion within the regulatory framework. One would expect that these pieces of legislations would make provisions for such situations. I'm not too sure what the law exactly says on that. Can you help with us?
Okay, thank you. Let me quickly check the act again. So maybe we can proceed. I'll come back.
Absolutely. I think that you can always proceed, because just like you say that Ghanaians must be interested, it's about you and it's about me. It is about the supervisory agencies. It is about what the law actually stipulates. And that's why I think that we will be better off to our listenership and to our own selves to ensure that everything that we're discussing would be placed within the law that has been stipulated to manage this whole situation. But I think that obviously...
I think I have an answer.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Petroleum Revenue Management Act does not provide explicit provisions for delays in petroleum receipts. Instead, what it does is essentially to focus on how revenue must be paid into the Petroleum Holding Fund immediately upon receipt. And it sets obligations for reporting, for transparency, and accountability. And in practice, delays are flagged in reports by the Bank of Ghana and the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. But the Act itself does not prescribe penalties or remedies for late inflows.
Now, in your considered opinion, do you think that this is significant enough for a certain review of that provision?
It is, because $500,000 is $500,000. And $500,000 can do something good for this country. Nothing comes to mind as to what it can do exactly for us. But $500 million is a good amount of money to fix a situation in a senior high school, to fix a situation in a public hospital. That amount of money can be able to settle that. So I think it's and this is one of many. We don't even know what is going to happen in the future. We are not even talking about what may have even happened in the past. And if we put all of that together, then we'll be going beyond that amount. So in my considered view, I think it's a significant amount that perhaps should bring policymakers back to the table to review the policy to include some of these things. Unless, of course, there is something that we are not privy to. Otherwise, I believe strongly that it needs a certain review.
Well, if we are not privy to it, I want to believe that on Z101.9 FM, your lifestyle, leisure, and business platform, we are very much interested and so would like to continue to ask these questions. Now, Emmanuel, before we move on to the next topic there, or the next significant provision in the report that has just been published, now, we try to look at how this could be the relief for it within the legal framework. We don't seem to have a specific provision for that. Now, in going forward, I have, asked you whether in your considered opinion this is something that is necessary to consider going forward. And you seem to agree with me. And I want to believe that many Ghanaians listening to us this morning would equally agree with us. But just before we move on, Emmanuel, what do we do? 500 million unreceived. We definitely should receive that. But even when it is received, how do we account for it in terms of the economic value going forward? What do you think should be done?
Thank you. I think I'll begin this way. First of all, the way in which the monies are reported or accounted for, I think that part of it is explicit in the framework. Now, I believe strongly that our 2025 petroleum revenue figures are understated by that amount. And it makes, so you see, because of that, when you want to compare to the previous year, you can also argue that it makes it a bit misleading. Because when you are not able to receive monies that you were supposed to receive in a certain period or during or within a certain period, then it makes the interpretation of the numbers a bit misleading.
The value of yes, money within a certain time frame is what you're referring to here.
Yes, exactly. Now, the Ghana National Petroleum Commission and the Ministry of Energy must review all crude sale agreements to include explicit late payment clauses and with interest charge. And now this is standard in international oil trading. And the clause should specify, 1, payment due date tied to bill of lading date plus X date. It should be clear in the contract. We must know what the interest accrual should be for each of the days that has been delayed. It's not like, once there's a delay, this amount. No. We should tie it to each of the days because this was over 45 days. This has been over 45 days. And we should also explicitly state the right to withhold future cargo allocation for repeated defaulters because we cannot continue this way. So I want that clear, explicit statement, 3 of them, in the, as clauses in the contract that we sign. And Ghana National Petroleum Commission and the Ministry of Energy, in fact, I should even include the Ministry of Finance, should spearhead this very, very closely. It's very, very significant.
And I think that you may have to restate this because when you said we must, I almost asked you who you and who. And the we, who are the we? And in law they would say co warranto. What is exactly? But I think it's a good call that you're making on the commission, the Ghana National Petroleum Commission, and the ministry responsible, and indeed very correctly adding that of the Minister of Finance. Is this suggesting, and I'm coming back to the 3 points that you think must be explicitly indicated in there? Can you just restate that? And I hope that Ghana is listening, and Ghana probably will be following up on this.
Yeah, thank you. So the first point I made was on payment due date. We must tie the payment due date to the bill of lading date plus X days. That must be clear. The second thing we have to do is interest accrual. And the interest accrual, I don't want to say it's in silos. In fact, I want to add something to it. Now, there is such a thing as SOFR. SOFR means Secured Overnight Financing Rate. Now, this is the benchmark interest rate that replaced the London Interbank offered rate. I'm trying to not mention the technical terms so that it becomes clearer. and that is published daily by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And it represents the cost of borrowing cash overnight secured by U.S. Treasury securities. And as of early 2026, the SOFR, which is secured overnight financing rate, is typically in the range of 4.5 to 5%. It varies, you see. And for me, I'm looking at SOFR plus premium. So there is a base rate, which is the risk-free overnight rate, like the 4.5 to 5.0, plus a premium, which is a spread, an additional percentage point to compensate us for, number one, our credit risk of the borrower, number two, liquidity risk, number three, administrative cost, number four, profit margin for the lender. Of course, I'm sure if somebody is a lawyer and then the person is listening to me, these things may not necessarily come in handy for them. But my background also requires me to put these things first, and perhaps that is why we must coexist. Because they may be looking at the paperwork, but I'm also looking at the time value of money and how you can restore me to my original position if you were to pay me on the 15th or so of November.
You'd be surprised, Emmanuel, how the legal brains would even want to fine-tune it further and making sure that this is a provision that will stand. But I think that I can't agree with you more. You know, the secured overnight financing rate plus the basic premium, I think, is something that we should all be looking at. But don't think that the lawyers are entirely oblivious of this. I'm sure that some real good financial lawyers are listening to this and are appreciating the point that you're making, and you'll be surprised how together we can build this very successfully. Now, the other two that you might want to very quickly, you know, just mention.
I've mentioned the payment you must tie that to the bill of lading. That was number one. And then the interest accrual at SOFR plus premium for each day of the delay. And number three is the right to withhold future cargo allocations for those who have defaulted in paying us. So that is the third one. That right must be included in the contract so that we don't always run at a loss. Because, you see, we cannot be giving the oil out and not receive the money. And sometimes it appears as though we are doing the rest of the world a favor. But I don't think, you know, when it comes to making money, love for country is held constant. And in fact, when it comes to making money on the global front, love for neighboring countries, allies, among others, is held constant. We were in this country, in just last year, there was a certain country that imposed a number of VAT obligations, a number of VAT obligations, a number of taxes on so many countries, and it led to price increases across board. Do you think they care? So, no, you see, that is it. And we must insist on what we want. We must demand it, and we must get it.
Take our oil, but don't forget to pay for it. Emmanuel Boateng so says. Emmanuel, let's continue now. We're looking at the second point, which did a year-on-year revenue drop analysis. And according to the report, some 46% drop in revenue is what has occurred. Again, how will this happen, and why will it happen, and how can we make sure that we're not experiencing any drops, but rather increasing?
Thank you. Now, the headline numbers, I mean, you see, the petroleum receipts fell from $369 million in the second half of 2024 compared to $198 million in the second half of last year, 2025. And that is a 46% year-on-year collapse. I don't even want to call it a reduction because this is not a decline. This is a collapse. And this is what we call a double shock. Production volumes are down and prices are down. And when you are suffering from both of them simultaneously, it is structurally dangerous because your fixed cost, which is debt service, public sector wages, they don't decline with your revenue. In fact, we are even paying more for public sector wages as a country. We are paying our debt. I saw the Honorable K.C. Forcing paying for some of our energy legacy debts. It has to be paid for. It doesn't reduce just because our receipts from energy is reducing. No, it doesn't decline with it. We have to pay for them. And so we cannot sustain a 46% year-on-year collapse or decline in the receipts. Now, the annual budget funding amount, which finances roads, which finances schools and health infrastructure, received $285 million this half, I mean the second half of 2025, compared to $288 million in 2024. So that part seems stable, but only because we were drawing down from the stabilization fund's excess amount. And that is a concern. Because I, in my opinion, you see, yes, I agree. We can draw down on the stabilization fund. That is within the framework. But that is also supposed to help us. It is more or less like to keep us stable, to keep us going, to serve as a shock absorber of a sort. And so how long can we keep drawing down on that when we keep missing receipts and the rest of them? We cannot keep on that way. And so although that was okay, but I think it cannot continue into the foreseeable future. And it is my concern. You see, if the 2026 budget was built assuming $70 to $75 per barrel, that is like the price of oil per barrel, and we are now realizing prices closer to $60 per barrel with declining production levels, then we are heading for a fiscal deficit gap, a fiscal slippage. And I have said time without number since last year, and in fact even this year, that our performance as a country, take the exchange rate for instance, the way in which it has performed has been a function of how certain prices have trended in our favor. Cocoa, gold, oil, and the rest of them. If these prices do not perform well, if we don't get the needed revenue from there, it will hurt us badly. And I've said time without number. Until we begin to look within and look at how we can strengthen this Ghanaian economy beyond what we can get from the outside market, beyond what we can get from our bilateral and multilateral partners, this economy ain't going anywhere. Because what happens outside of Ghana cannot mean more for us than what happens within this country. And that is why we must hold ourselves together. So the Ministry of Finance must revise revenue projections immediately, or will end 2026 borrowing more from the treasury market, for instance, at a rate that crowd out the private sector credit, which is in itself is also not good for this economy. We do not want to crowd out the private sector. We don't want our businesses to go to the commercial banks looking for financing, and all they hear is that the government has taken all the money. All the money has been sold to the government in the form of treasury bills. No, that cannot be our story. We must strengthen our institutions. We must grow our private sector. We should be able to grow our economy, and we should be able to do so without selling off our revenues from petroleum, without any strong bids. No, it must be properly checked.
And I think it's a double no from the studios as well, because if you look at the numbers, they're quite staggering. I mean, if you compare 198.25 million to that of 369.25 million, that is almost a half. And so when you say no, I just cannot agree with you more, because obviously, this is tied to what the budget arrangements are. And definitely, if you do not have any direct or specific adjustments made to the 2026 budget, to accommodate this kind of shortfall, then we're likely to be increasing national deficit, which is what you say, no, let's not do it. And I think that from the studios of Zed 101.9 FM, we cannot agree with you more. It's a double no. We need to do something. But before we move on to the next, Emmanuel, what do you think can be done in looking at this adjustment? Obviously, I know the Honorable Minister for Finance, Honorable Ato KCL Aforson, Doctor, is listening to you this morning. He told me the last time that he enjoys your commentary when it comes to national economic matters. What are some of the tips that you just want to share with him?
Thank you. Sorry, I left out the doctor when I was mentioning his name. He forgives me.
Anka Tanara, on Shada mind the doctor Nipi, them see on your problem. But go ahead. Aye.
In our part of the world, people take it very seriously. And so, okay, more specifically, what must be done? The first one is immediate revenue projection revision. We must revise our projection immediately. Now, we must revise the petroleum revenue projection downwards so that it reflects the new reality, the reality on the ground. Now, our current assumption is pegging the price per barrel between $70 to $75 per barrel. The realistic price could be 60 to 62. There is a principle, a concept in accounting called prudence. What it means is that do not overestimate profits, but make provision for all possible losses. And what conservatism teaches us is that even if you have a certain sense that it is even 70, based on what is happening, it's better for you to peg it at 60 or 62, so that when it falls to 60 or 62, you are within your band. But if you peg it at 70 to 75 and it falls to 60 to 62, then clearly there will be a fiscal slippage. And that is why I say we should look at the revision. We should look at it. Matter if we continue budgeting based on optimistic projections, we'll have a 3 to 4 billion revenue, 3 to 4 billion Ghana cedis revenue shortfall, which will force emergency domestic borrowing halfway through the year at very punitive rates, which is not good for us. And who should do it? Of course, the Ministry of Finance, with technical input from the Ghana Petroleum Commission and the Bank of Ghana. And we must do this before the end of the first quarter, before 31st March 2026. And we must publish the revised petroleum revenue assumptions in the mid-year budget review. The other thing is for us to freeze our non-critical expenditure that is tied to APFA. We must be able to freeze that. You know, APFA typically funds 4 priority areas. I mentioned that: roads, education, agriculture, and capacity building. And we must be able to identify which areas can be frozen so that we are able to work well within our range. And we must also accelerate our revenue diversification strategy. And I think these 3 will be key for us. These 3 will be key for us, and that is quite essential. And I know the Minister of Finance is a listening minister, and he's going to execute these. Perhaps he may have even thought of them.
Oye, Ankrato, Mama Wache, Emmanuel Boatin, Osinde, Butuma, Bomazina, revise projections. And of course, this is how we are building the Republic of Ghana, in ensuring that we are making very meaningful contributions to all that we are very much concerned about. Time doesn't seem to be favoring us, but Emmanuel, we still have to run through this very quickly. Now, you know that the stabilization fund has this cap of 100 million, and that allows the government to withdraw in excess of about $66.88 million and all that. Now, the question here is that does this $100 million buffer provide any real macroeconomic stability for an economy of Ghana's size? Or has the fund effectively become a secondary spending account rather than a strategic buffer against oil price shocks?
Thank you very much. The Ghana Stabilization Fund indeed has a statutory cap of $100 million. And during the second half of last year alone, we reduced 66.88 million as excess amount above this cap. What that means is that we reduced $166.88 million instead of $100 million. Now, let me put that in perspective. 100 million covers less than 1 week of Ghana's total import bill. If we face an oil price crash to say a $40 per barrel for oil, which is entirely possible given the global weakness in the demand for oil, then this fund will be depleted almost instantly. So when I put it in perspective, you realize it's a very big issue. The original intent of the stabilization fund is to save during good times so that it will cushion us against price shocks. That is why I'm saying that it acts like a buffer. It's like a shock absorber. So by keeping the cap artificially low at $100 million, we have essentially converted what should be a strategic buffer into a supplementary spending account. We are treating the Ghana Stabilization Fund as an ATM. It should not be an ATM. And a credible stabilization mechanism for an economy of Ghana's size, over $75 billion of GDP, should hold at least $500 million. And this would force genuine fiscal discipline. And by that, when oil prices are high, we actually save instead of declaring everything above $100 million as excess for immediate spending. This is worrying, and we cannot continue like this.
Iman, do you recall when, this cap was pegged at $100 million?
Not immediately.
Okay.
I'm sure that time I'm not as I am today.
No, but if we're looking at, the law that regulates it and all that, it probably takes some kind of precedence from around the times that these may have been. I'm trying to see probably what is the logic or the rationale behind keeping it at 100 million. If the first law was passed in 2011 and was so amended in 2015, and the latest amendment has been in 2020, I would presume that even if we are basing it at 2020, it's been 5 years, getting to 6 years already. And so I'm just trying to see what probably could have been logically the reason why this may have been pegged at 100 million without moving it.
Well, I think I will be able to respond to that. Now, the first part, when it was capped at $100 million, it was actually introduced in 2015 under the Act 893. So that was when it was capped. The amendment set so the amendment in 2015 set a statutory ceiling of 100 million for the Ghana Stabilization Fund. So any inflows above this cap are deemed excess and must be transferred to the annual budget funding amount for spending. And why was it capped? I think the logic behind the cap was largely fiscal, and if you permit me, I'll even add political to it. The first was to prevent hoarding of funds. You see, policymakers argued at the time that keeping too much in the stabilization fund was inefficient when Ghana faced pressing budgetary needs. And then the other reason was to ensure liquidity for the budget. By declaring everything above $100 million as excess, the government could then channel more petroleum revenues directly into spending and maybe balance between saving and spending. You see, the cap was also meant to strike a good balance between maintaining a buffer for oil price volatility and meeting immediate fiscal demand.
So if what you're saying is anything to go by, then it's been about 11 years already. 2015 to 2016. What would you say would be a prudent, and you referred to prudence in finance and in accounting, what would be a prudent if the need for any adjustments to be made as we usher into 2026?
Well, I had $500 million for me would be okay.
And the basis?
Ghana's GDP now exceeds $75 billion. Now, back in 2015, our GDP was not that amount. Was way less. In fact, let me just check. GDP of Ghana in 2015. Yeah, I think it was below. Just a moment.
Okay, so the point you're making is that probably at the time it was quite prudent to put it at that, but over time, looking at the economy, looking at other factors that may have accounted for where we stand today, it probably is prudent to adjust it by about 500%. That's what you're saying.
It was $49 billion in 2015.
Okay.
And today we have a GDP of about $75 billion. So, sincerely, like I did say earlier, our monthly imports bill is more than $1 billion. And so $100 million cap covers less than 1 week of imports. And it's too small to cushion against oil price shocks. The whole point is to cushion against oil price shocks.
Okay.
And when the amount cannot even cover 1 week of your imports, what are you cushioning against? Nothing.
Nothing is what we could be cushioning, that against. Emmanuel, time is not so much on our side. We've just got about 2 minutes because in about 12 minutes, we'll be getting to 9 o'clock and we should be starting our roundtable discussions by now. But before you go, there are issues about the impact of this drastic reduction, and I'm referring to close to about 74% reduction in funding impact on GNPC's ability to meet its cash call obligations and invest in increasing production, especially as our current fields show signs of decline. How would you batch that up with the future-proofing against the declining oil prices, the Heritage Fund returns versus inflation, and lastly, the declining production volumes in key fields?
Thank you. I think that is a very important question to close with. I think that the Bank of Ghana's outlook, the forecast for Brent crude is at approximately $52 per barrel in both 2026 and 2027. And that reflects a weakening global demand, particularly from China, and as we have seen, continued geopolitical uncertainty. Now, the critical question which arises from your question is that our fiscal framework accounts for a lower for longer scenario. And I think most of our IMF program commitments and primary surplus targets are sensitive to oil revenue assumptions. So for me, I would recommend the government actively to hedge a portion of our future cargoes using forward contracts. If the forecast is 62, but we can lock in 65 to 68 through hedging instruments, then we protect our budget from any further downside effects. You see, currently we appear to be selling entirely at spot prices, and that leaves us fully exposed to market volatility. And this isn't speculative trading, no. It is prudent fiscal risk management, similar to what countries like Mexico have done systematically. And I think it's something we can learn from. We do forward contracts with our cocoa. I'm not extolling it because sometimes I do have issues with some of the contracts that we've signed. But I think it is something that could be implemented because with our forecast, we can negotiate for it. In any case, we have the oil. The people need the oil. And I think we have the greatest strength when we get to the negotiation table. And we should be able to do so.
Well, we've got the oil. The people need the oil. We've got to make sure that we are selling our oil and, much more importantly, collecting all that is due us. Let's look at what the regulatory framework is all about, and let's ensure that we are tightening all the loose ends, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, so that at the end of the day, Ghana, Africa, and for that matter, the global village will be the victor. This is how I say thank you very much, Emmanuel Boateng, our in-house economic analyst, who has promised that come next week, Monday, he'll be sitting right in front of me here doing what he does best. Ima, have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Do have a great day, too.
52 minutes gone past the hour of 8, and it's just about getting to 9 o'clock, and shortly after this musical break, we'll be coming back to you in analyzing what tourism receipts, tourism arrivals, its contribution to economic development. And you do not want to miss that, because Professor Gabriel Opia-Ishen is standing by to come your way with all that you require in ensuring that we support tourism to its best. Nana Safo sitting in for Ni Trebi on Zed 101.9 FM.
This is Business Breakfast on Z101.9 FM. This is Business Breakfast on Z101.9 FM.
And that was Oseye by the very famous but diseased George Dako, with Oseye coming to you live from the studios of Z101.9 FM. It is your lifestyle. It's about leisure and business. This morning, we have been doing a blend of all those, giving you some wonderful tunes that relaxes you, but of course, talking some real serious business, economic matters. Just about moving on to the next. It's exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, and you do not want to change your dial. Just get glued to it. You can follow us on Facebook because we're streaming live, and on YouTube. You will get everything live there. And if you want to contribute via WhatsApp, 0544321019 or 0303956641. And for other information, entertainment, and all the news, you can reach us on Instagram, on Facebook, on X at ZFMGH, on TikTok and YouTube. In fact, if you want to follow us right now on our streams on YouTube, you can get us on Z Multimedia. And this is where you can get the best of leisure. You can get the best of lifestyle and the best of business. Stay tuned, because in just a short while, I've got Professor Gabriel Ishen on the line, and he's just about speaking to the issue of tourism and its impact on national development. We did hear earlier on what the receipts were for 2023, and which gave a significant improvement in 2024. What is finally going to happen in 2025? We are told that in December alone, it's estimated that about 500 million US dollars may have been accrued to the national kitty. And so we're going to look at how all this would, accrue to proper national development. The marketing of it, we all remember what's happened in the last 10 days or so, the visit by I Show Speed. Yes, I got that right. Somebody was saying that, na abe Aisha sunu abagana here. You're here, Aisha. Oh yeah, Aisha. Oh yeah, I Show Speed. The visit of this gentleman and what impact it's had on Ghana. How are we going to very strategically manage Ghana with over about 50 million plus followers or viewers, just because of his visit to Ghana? How are we building tourism? And Professor Gabriel Ishen is right on the line as I speak. Opia, mama wachi.
Watching.
Wapo man.
Yeah, no way.
I don't. Erade wa ma za chi hina adze no chere enyidado owo odima Ghana fu nyinara. Well, Prof, coming back to the business for the day. We Ghana knows you as one of the foremost professors of tourism and its development and all that. Can you in taking off this morning just give us a brief gist of when we say tourism, what it's all about?
Thank you very much. It is the nature of humans to make the best out of the environment. And it has been stated over and over again that when the bird does not fly,
it ends up in hunger. But the hunger is not one of just the biology. The soul itself sometimes becomes so anemic because we fail to feed it with other experiences. And that is why it is important as human beings to be able to break the quotidian imprisonment that we have and to be able to go out there and explore. And by exploring, we rejuvenate ourselves with the fresh breath of the other places. And that is where tourism comes in, where we're able to move outside our normal ambience and be able to experience other places. And by doing so, we're able to learn new things, we're able to experience new things, and the soul itself comes back, refreshed. And that is the essence of tourism, to get you out of your normal environment and for you to be able to experience other places, because that is what humans should do.
The tourism on a quotidian abazina so do no pia.
It's a quotidian realities.
That is the realities of the day and a daily experience and stuff like that.
Yeah, it becomes banal. Like every day you are at the same place. It becomes banal, like so common. So it is important. Tourism is the one that comes in to break that everyday boredom, everyday experience. It gives you a different worldview because by you traveling to another place, you're able to add new experiences. And life is actually built on experiences.
Excellent. And that's what the French will say, les expériences quotidiennes. That's what you said. Exactly. If I'll take it to the French language, isn't it? Excellent. Opia, now you've given a wonderful elaboration of what tourism actually is, but we also know that the United Nations would give us a certain definition. You have given us the practical one. Yes. If we were to write what the United States or the United Nations, I should say, would define what tourism would be, what would be the closest to it?
Okay. So in terms of the nomenclature of tourism, first, there are some things that we need to consider.
Okay.
A tourist does not go to a place for remuneration. In other words, if you go to a place and you are going to work and all that, we don't consider you as a tourist. So that is where the leisure aspect comes in for tourism. Also, you are expected, all things being equal, to spend at least 24 hours. And that is where also the practical aspect comes in, because what about those who are excursionists and may not be able to spend 24 hours, but they go to watch the museums, they go to the seaside and what have you. So the actual definition is there by the 24 hours mandate and all that, but it's not like, cast in stone.
It's not cast in stone. Yes. It is just indicating that you should be able to spend some considerable time at this other location that you might want to go to. Is that right?
Exactly.
Now, before you continue, Pia, you talked about a tourist or tourism would not consider going to a place to go and work for and stuff like that. I have heard you talk about business tourism and stuff like that. Where is the axis? Where are you pitching these two concepts? Where originally you're not supposed to be going to make money, but you would also consider others who would travel for business as business tourists and stuff like that. Any slight elaboration or elucidation on that?
Yeah, thank you very much. Tourism is export. And because by its very nature, it is part of the service industry. Business tourism is more about going to seek for opportunities. So, for example, under MICE, you can have an investment summit, for example.
That's right.
And when you have investment summit, you are not actually there working for the money. It's a conduit for getting the money. You see, so it's the service aspect of it that we are actually looking for. So, for example, when you go for visitors visa to USA, you are supposed to go and tour the place. But if you want to go and work there, you take a different visa to go. And these are some of the nuances that come out when it comes to tourism.
Okay.
But altogether, like I said, sometimes the textbook definitions must not become an albatross, because we've seen time and again about categories of tourism sometimes ethically may not even be allowed to stand. But then again, it might actually be what is fueling the tourism of a place. I mean, the quintessential tourism is about what we call the 3S tourism.
That's right.
Which is about the sun, where you go and you have some tan and all that, because to actually tease out what we call the fons et origo, or the origin of what tourism is about, it actually started somewhere 1841 in Leicester, in Midlands, England, when Thomas Cook, who was then a Baptist minister, was trying to let some people in Leicester not partake in a beer festival. So he organized a trip for them to go to Loughborough during the festive period, so that by the time they come back, the beer drinking session would have gone. People loved that trip. And later on, he started, taking people to Rome and other places. That is the beginning of tourism. And that is why at the train station at Leicester, you have the statue of Thomas Cook standing there as an embodiment of him being, this kind of tourism that we're talking about. But it was more after the Second World War, when the Europeans realized that there were free aircraft and all that, some of them, coming at the back of the wall. And they realized that why don't we really use some of these for leisure? Also, laws were being passed where people had paid holidays. And the paid holidays allowed them, because during that time, they may be in winter and all that, in summer and other places. So they used the money from their paid holiday to go to Spain and other warmer places in Europe, and now to the Caribbean, US, and whichever place you can think about. So that really is the history of what tourism has become. Then we realize that when you go to the post-productivist paradigm, which is more about looking beyond what is in the soil, what is on top of the soil, to what comes from the human soul, the human hospitality, and the interactions, we realize that tourism really can become the linchpin, activity really that can leapfrog people, and countries by getting higher GDPs and all that. It will interest you to know that tourism and hospitality account for 10% of global GDP. Last year, 2024, and last year alone, too, tourism generated 357 million jobs. In fact, it's on record that among every 15 jobs created, tourism is right there with one. So 2025 alone, tourism generated 11 trillion. And it is being forecasted that by 2034, tourism will reach $16 trillion US.
So these are global figures, is that right?
Yes, from the for the UNWTO,
okay,
which is actually the body for this. And if you go to WTTC, these figures are just there.
Excellent.
But the thing is that Africa is still having a Picyon segment. A Picyon segment, Picyon segment.
We need to look at doubling our efforts and increasing our efforts in taking the rightful component of the cake.
Yes, because tourism is seen as an appurtenance, as something to be played with, a plaything. It's not taken as a serious sector, all right? And because we have been so much, cocooned, colonized with what is in the soil, what is on top of the cocoa, the gold, the diamond, the lithium, and all that. But the world is moving, and we must be able to look at the whole panoply of items that we have got to be able to position the country sustainably in terms of development. And that is why I keep saying that tourism is the new gold. Tourism is the new gold because you've seen what gold has done for us. First, gold was the reason why the transatlantic slave trade happened to us more. Because Kwame Ansa and all the rest, after they allowed the Elmina Castle to be this, and after they, in fact, they didn't even allow it at first, but the Portuguese forced them. And that's why Ghana have 75% out of all the slave edifices. Now, when you look at what gold has done to us, even up to now, there's still a lot of fight and romanticization and politicization, on gold, as if our mind is put in a box. but we are supposed to be thinking outside the box about the potential, the stupendous potential of tourism to the economy. And I can tell you for a fact that if Kwame Nkrumah Memorial Park could generate 10 million Ghana cedis just last year, all right, after the refurbishment, then you can then think through and see what the country stands to gain by leveraging on its strength, by looking at all the 16 regions and how we can strategically develop tourism in a way that spread the national cake to bring the needed material comfort, because we seem to be so much idealistic with our thinking, forgetting that the material consequences that we need to really confront as a country.
Prof, I was expecting you to mention the Asinema waterfalls in my holy village, in a Dukrum, very close to Akropong, where I sit, as a Bakmahini of the Kwapem traditional area. But I'll forgive you for that. I think that you have laid the basis for today's discussion. The world, life, business is not all about gold. Tourism can do much more than what gold and cocoa probably would have done in the past. I think this is an excellent basis for it. But Prof, before we go into the numbers and how we can achieve these numbers and all that, I loved your basic definition of what tourism is all about. But then you also gave that consideration to what business tourism. I've heard you talk about agro-tourism. I've heard you talk about health tourism and stuff like that. Can you just give us just a gist of some of these other tourism activities that can also help in generating funds? Then we'll come back and go into the details of what tourism can bring to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks to the audience for listening in this morning. As a nation, it is always important. Nkrumah says something very important. Kwame Nkrumah, the Osadefo, says something very important. He says that we need to bring the gun to town. And I always have a way of, blowing this one out. That is more about everybody bringing their gifts on board for national development. And one of the things that we need to know and to really put into practice is the need for us not to just benchmark, but also to seek for authenticity. And that is where tourism comes in strongly. For example, Ghana is part of the top 25 African countries with richness and rarity in biodiversity. And when we talk about biodiversity, we are talking about the natural environment, the plant and animals that are there. Although we are having Galamsey doing us in and the deforestation, yada, yada. But Ghana still has a huge, amount of animals and an amount of plants that are endemic, that are just endemic to this place. And then ecotourists come in. When we say ecotourists are the tourists that are interested in looking at animals and plants and natural sceneries and all that. So, for example, when you go to Pafori Lodge at Limpopo in South Africa, you go and watch the animals, the big five, as we call them in tourism, which is the buffaloes, the elephant, the leopards, the lions, and the rhinoceros. We may not have all the five charismatic species. When we say charismatic, that is, they are often the ones that are put at the back of the magazines. They're the ones that visitors often love to watch. But the good news is that we have hippos here in Ghana. Now we have even zebra here, and we have elephants at Mole, So we can hold our own when it comes to ecotourism. There are people at Bobri, butterfly sanctuary. We've got some of the biggest butterflies in West Africa, right there at Bobri in Asante region. So there are a lot of things that we can do even in ecotourism. And the good news is this, that when you look at ecotourism, which is by the definition of the Ecotourism Society, the International Society for Ecotourism, when you look at the definition, it says that ecotourism is a travel to natural areas that contribute to the conservation of plant and animals and the well-being of the local communities. So that is one of the most cardinal tourism activities that really is not only about conservation, but the development aspect of people and their areas as well. That's why I call it the dual mandate of ecotourism, which is conservation and development. Now, in Ghana, we have what they call the state-led ecotourism, which is the tourism that was based on the colonial forest reservations. So, for example, Kakum, Mole, Ankasa, all these ones were areas that during the colonialism, they realized that they have to conserve some of the natural areas from, destruction and man-made, interventions that were not actually adding up to the environment. So they conserved these areas. And after 1957, we realized that the Forest Cap 1957 actually allowed us to be able to conserve these and to put them under the jurisdiction of the government. So government now has oversight of these places through the Forestry Commission, all right? So the Forestry Commission now look at what we can do with these areas, and that is how we came out with the state-led ecotourism, what I call the state-led ecotourism. That is, they taking a frontal, approach to it by taking charge of the environment. But the only caveat is that we know that most of these places were what we call the common pool resource. In other words, the forest is there. You may not go in there, but you can go in there for snail and other non-forest products, which was allowed. So when you have tourism and it is not actually benefiting the local communities, it creates what we call in the Doxy Iridex, framework. It creates a bit of antagonism. And the antagonism is between the locals and the visitors. And when that happens, the visitors, of course, will lose interest in visiting the places. And that is why we advocated for the community-based ecotourism. The community-based ecotourism is a community actually taking charge of the resources under their domains and actually bringing tourism on it to be able to create some semblance of development in their areas. And now the beautiful thing is that because of some of the successes of the community-based ecotourism like Boabin Fiemam, Monkey Sanctuary, Tafia Tome, and other places, now we have, for example, Paradise Resort, we have all these Gumwa Wonderland, Gumwa Konkoland, it's springing up everywhere. They're crowned, forests where the president of the land now, Muhammad President, His Excellency, just visited somewhere in Central Region. So people are now seeing the benefit of even ecotourism and bringing some of the fauna, especially some of these charismatic fauna, right from South Africa and Kenya and all that, and bringing them in Ghana because people want to see some of these animals. So in terms of ecotourism, we've got a great stake, to be able to really benefit. I mean, if you go to Paga, we've got a bit of cultural thing to it, but that's also ecotourism because of the quite convivial, friendly, crocodiles that we've got there. Then you come to agrotourism. Agrotourism is really about going to agricultural areas. So the difference between ecotourism and agrotourism is that with ecotourism, it is more about in situ conservation. And when we say in situ conservation, that means that the plants are already there by nature. But agriculture is about cultivation and rearing. So here we are talking about the sheep, the goat, the poultry. We are talking about the oranges and all that. These are cultivated. And cocoa, and that's why I'm advocating for agrotourism in Ghana, because Ghana, really, there's something called the premium cocoa on the world market because of Ghana's cocoa. And a lot of people have not even seen the cocoa tree before. So the onus is on us. In fact, I remember doing something for GTA about 10 years ago, which they presented, in Italy on agrotourism. I don't know what became of it, but I remember doing a whole concert for them to take it there to present. And the thing is that it was about the fact that Ghana can position itself as the cocoa tourism hub in the world, because we are the number 2 in terms of cocoa production, and our neighbor Ivory Coast is just the listen. But the amazing thing is that the whole value chain of the cocoa can be put out there for people to see, right from the sowing of the seeds and the planting, then to the harvesting, to what have you, to the packaging and everything. It can all be shown. I mean, when you go to Mampong, where we have Tata Kwashe's place,
I don't know
The
why.
Tete Kwashi Center, where cocoa is said to have been planted for the first time in Ghana. Yeah.
Yes, and it's there. The farm is there. The man is buried there. You know, and you have it, and it's a white elephant. All right. So we need to be able to walk our talk, but first of all, having African being born in us. Now to the slave castles, we have 75% out of all the edifices. The oldest European edifice in sub-Saharan Africa is at Elmina, 1482. Now, Cape Coast Castle was the headquarters of the English slave trade apparatus. So when it comes to diasporic travel or route travel or, historical travel, Ghana must be at in the marketing, we say the evoke set should be at the top of it. But when you go to Gorée Island in Senegal, you realize that they don't have what we have, with all due respect, in terms of the numbers that we have in it. But they're getting the people coming in over and over again, and we can do more. I'm not saying we are doing nothing. We can do more to be able to attract this thing by forming the right narrative, not only around the castles, but looking at the slave routes right from Salaga and even beyond, and telling a story that is compelling, a story that is Afro-optimistic, a story that is able to really position us in a way, because life is about storytelling. And so far, our stories have too much divergence instead of the confluence that is needed to be able to create the right images and the catharsis that we need to be able to draw the individuals from every part of the world. Brazil alone has the highest number of Africans in the diaspora. We never talk much about them. Our focus is on the US. But the whole world with scattered Africans, Ghana, with its peaceful nature and hospitable nature, being one of the most peaceful countries in Africa, can commoditize this intangible aspect and then put it out there for people to see. In terms of our gastronomy, there's stupendous jollof, fufu, you name it. Everybody who comes to Ghana just love our food, the prepared one, and even our fruits, the pineapples, the mangoes, you name them. These are real nutrition for the body. And we need to be able to kind of package them and not to also give them. We need branding. So, for example, you have a very nice snack like roasted plantain and granite, and you call it Kofi Brokman. That's rubbish. All right? You need to be able to touch it. In fact, I just came from Rabat in Morocco, and I was ordering my meal one time. They call something crying tiger. So I have to Google what the crying tiger is. Okay? Create the suspense. Create something out of it. Don't be Afro-pessimistic with the way we package some of the things. You must be able to bring what I call the refugient nature of our heritage. That sunshine nature of us must show, so that the darkness of the mind and the darkness of our gradualism can give way to the cheetah factor that we need to be able to move on.
Absolutely. Professor Gabriel Eshen, who is Professor of Tourism and Marketing Management, going so wild there in the fray, defining and giving us what tourism is all about. But Prof, don't forget, before we go, since you are outlawing Kofi Brokman, my most preferred, basic meal for the day, you want to give me the name that from tomorrow I'll start calling it before you will go away. So be thinking about that. Exactly, good people out there. It's 28 minutes past 9 o'clock. It's the 3rd of February, 2026. And we are looking at the economic benefits of what tourism will bring to us. And we've been listening to Professor Gabriel Eshen. He says that when it comes to ecotourism, Ghana is not lacking at all. When it comes to agrotourism, we are probably one of the best in the whole of the world. Now, talking about heritage sites, forts and castles. And it is confounding to know that almost about 75%, not almost about, but exactly 75% of all these forts and castles are located within Ghana, even making reference to the oldest found in Elmina. What have we done to all this? I was getting a little disappointed when we got down to Kofi Brookman, but the good thing is that before he leaves, he would give me a suitable name for that. But what are we doing? We're talking about tourism, how we can turn it around so we can allow the gold and the cocoa and the others, which have always been defined as the robber industry. It's always going away from us. In fact, we could still find a way of selling what we have and then be able to display them as well and get people to come and see it and pay for them. That is what we have been doing on Z 101.9 FM this Tuesday morning, the 3rd of February 2026 in the year of our Lord. Prof, now you have looked at all that it is that is required to put us number one on the calendar of tourism. But you would know, you just mentioned something. You said branding. You talked about marketing earlier. If we have all these things and we are not marketing them, and we'll be moving later on into the digital marketing, you know that recently the role of people who do these social media things, the iShow, Speed, and Co. and all that. You know, there are technical names that you might want to refer to them. I am not an expert in those areas because I leave them to you. But the point is that how do we market? How do we brand them? And then we'll put in context this visit by iShow Speed on his iShow Tour Africa, project that he just embarked on, which we are told that on social media attracted over 50 million followers. How are we going to extract, if there is anything like that, the pecuniary value of all these things that we have in the marketing, probably digital marketing of all these resources that we have? Prof.
Thank you very much. So with the Kofi Brookman, for example, we can call it Yomi Twin or Tasty Twin.
Bazi Twin.
Tasty Twin or Yomi Twin.
Yomi, which one is that?
The Kofi Brookman, the Garnot and the Rosa Pande, they're always going together. So they are
twins. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Tasty Twin.
Okay. Tasty Twin. Tasty Twin. You don't like Kofi Brookman.
No,
you like Tasty Twin.
Kokonte, then you say face the wall. A very nice meal, all right? Then you say face
but why?
the wall.
When you are eating Kokonte, don't you face the wall, Professor?
No, you don't face the wall.
What do you do? How do you know the Kokonte
you
basic?
eat it like any normal meat. Let me give you a palpable example. The way the Nigerians eat gari, with that kind of joy, Ghanaians look at gari as if they are eating some punishment. That's the mindset.
But gari is what took all of us through our formative years in secondary school, at the university, and everywhere.
Exactly. Colonial gastronomy. That is the problem. All right? So it's part of the mental decolonization that we have to embark on. And now back to the marketing. Marketing, according to Philip Kotler, all right, is starting with a need and getting some benefit from it. And what is a need? A need is a state of what? Deprivation. That's self-deprivation. When you actually look at the Maslow hierarchy, right, from the physiological, all right, to the actualization, all along that, as a country, we must look at it, which level that we are. And the good news with tourism is that it's cut across all the ladder. So because when you come to Ghana, you get good food, which is the physiological, all right? It's about interaction,
absolutely,
the social bonding. Then you go. So all the hierarchy right down to actualization, you have got people who get to the castle and they cry. They cry not because they are filled with anger and hatred and all that. No, they cry because of what we call catharsis. They are so nice fans, they're bonding, all right, that I am finally home. So that is why we have the glorious door of return, where they come and write, oh, now I am home. So we need to be able to, let me give you a palpable example just so that our audience will enjoy it even into its practical.
Please proceed.
1945 was when we had the most cardinal congresses, African congresses. That Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, George Padmore, W.E. Du Bois, all of them were there. Last year was the 80th anniversary. I was talking to people over and over again that with Ghana's position as a Pan-African Mecca, all right, we should have a way to make sure that we put it right up in on a map. If you Google on this, and what they did was just something up at once, something small. I had to go to Morocco with a friend who just heard it and then took it to Morocco, and the Moroccans Academy took it on and invited us to go and speak to it. Why was something that Kwame Nkrumah was co-secretary with George Padmore, which could have brought a lot of light to not only W.E. Du Bois, the W.E. Du Bois guys were there, the George Padmore guys were there, and all that. All right? See, it is the thing. You don't read history and sleep on it. You read history to wake you up.
So 1945 to 2025 was so significant that Ghana could have. It's fine for Morocco because after all they are in Africa, and Kwame Nkrumah's cry and vision was for the unity of the African continent. But I agree with you that if it emanated from here, then we probably could have packaged it and sold it primarily to the rest of Africa because it was for Africa, and then secondarily to the rest of the world. This is the point you're making.
Exactly, because the year of return and the beyond the return, these activities and events and programs, initiatives, they gave credence to Ghana's position again, added on to the Emancipation Day and the Pan-African. All right? So you always go back into history, and then you see what is in history that you can use. Tourism feeds on his story and her story, okay? So you need to go in there and see what you can bring up. The year of return was successful because it was based on something historical.
Okay.
So why is it that we allow history to become banal and just at the back of our minds without us looking at it? All I'm trying to say is that Ghana must be positioned as the most preferred tourism destination in Africa. It is going to be a mirage unless we walk our talk. And that will also mean that we need to be able to look at the private sector and see how they can work together with the tourism ministry, and the agencies under the tourism ministry must be able to help the minister to see how their vision can blossom in a way that serves national interest.
Okay.
If you continue with the dicegy instead of the synergy that is needed, if you continue to be tackling ourselves, instead of really looking at the major things that we allow divide and conquer strategies to pulverize our souls, we will not get anywhere. No nation has developed by practicing cannibalism. Nations develop by bringing all their gifts together on the table.
Again.
And again and again, and I say, in the rhetoric of Kwame Nkrumah, is Africa being born in us? As somebody who is blood related to Kwame Nkrumah, when I go to Nzama area, my hometown, and anytime I go to a place where he dug a well for the community in Sayim for us to drink when there's dry season and all that, I just look at why he was always thinking into the future. And the nation must not be looking at their booty. We should be looking at our stars. And the beauty is that God has blessed us with a lot of tangible things. Our kente, which has become an African cultural symbol. What are we doing with it? Our beads, what festivals have we done with it? Our high life, what have we done with it? You see,
high life, Opian, just 1 second. High life, Zed is the home of high life. You missed the high life concert in July of 2025, where Kwabwa, the iconic artist, sold some stupendous. This year, you aren't going to miss that. And I tell you, this is why Zed 101.9 FM should be your home for lifestyle, just to make sure that you are keeping yourself so well and healthy and good. Your leisure, if it comes to rest, relaxation, and recreation, and then finally business, which will bring all the money into the kitty and which will determine where your future would be. It sits right here on Zed 101.9 FM. today we are looking at tourism and its impact on national development. And our guest has been Professor Gabriel Opia Ishen, and he has been sharing some wonderful insights. It's exactly 39 minutes, just about 40 minutes gone past the hour of 9. In 20 minutes, we'll be wrapping up the discussion. But if you want to join us, if you want to share your views about the conversation, that which went on earlier and what is rightly on now, you can WhatsApp us through 0544 321 019 or 030 395 6641. We are actually streaming live now on Facebook and YouTube. Join us and share your impressions. Later on, you can join us on Instagram and on X, of course, with Facebook on ZFMGH. And if you want to go visit what Zed has on TikTok, it's Zed Multimedia, just like we have on YouTube. For now, it's about how tourism will inure to the benefit of the common man, to the aggregation of the Ghanaian, and indeed to the African continent and the global world. But what Opia says is that let's stay away from the daiseji and rather begin to pursue what synergies will bring to us, just so we can live. Opia, as the clock keeps ticking, there is some data that we should look at, because you are beginning to look at how these things can point us to the right direction, just so that we can benefit from all these things in moving forward. There is the data which says that in 2023, and permit me, I'll limit myself to international arrivals, even though the data also speaks to the fact that domestic tourism has been pretty good over the period. Let's just limit ourselves to international tourism for now. And it says that in 2023 alone, we had about 1.15 million visitors coming into Ghana. And can you guess what this actually translated into in terms of receipts? Over 3.86 billion US dollars. Now, when you move to 2024, there was a 14% increase in international arrivals. It moved from 1.15 million to 1.28 million, translating into over 4.8 billion United States dollars. Now, the 2025 data is yet to be officially released. But we all know, I wonder where this other name I heard the last time came from. They say what? Dirty December or something? No, I have known it to be December in GH. I don't know where the dirty one actually came from. It is for us to come back home and come and enjoy what we have. Well, we'll have to look at the nomenclatures and see how they all sit rightly with us. But the figures are pointing to an estimated 500 million United States dollars. And that was just for December, just the 31 days of the last month of the year 2025. Just December. What about the 11 other months? We'll wait for the rest of the official information that comes to us. But Opia, the picture I'm trying to put together here is, if you look at the progress, the trajectory that we have traveled over the period, before COVID, during COVID, 2023, 2024, 2025, if you look at these figures, what is it that we cannot do if we had a certain directed, strategic, and deliberate effort at pushing tourism in this country?
Thank you very much. And I'm quite happy when I hear the figures, because it has been part of our research showing that by 2025 we should have generated 5 billion. When we mentioned 5 billion, people thought we were just drinking some, utopian beer. But the truth is that it has always been like that, that even one time a tourism minister was called Minister for Entertainment, because we don't really understand the cardinal role of tourism. Tourism is not a child's play. Tourism, besides this pecuniary benefit, has a lot of national, cultural, historical reunification that African personality that Nkrumah talked about is actually on the shoulders of tourism, because that is where we actually can socialize. In other words, we can bring the Africanness back to us, because you can really get a nation filled with a lot of knowledge, but they lack understanding and the wisdom that actually encompass them as Africans, and that is where tourism comes in. So the onus is on us for us to look at the quantitative aspect, and I've always loved quantitative aspect because, of course, materially we need to benefit from it. It's not a shocker to me that we, as a country, were able to get 4.8 billion thereabout, US dollars in tourism receipts. My joy is that one day, very soon, like by 2030, tourism will become the number one contributor to our GDP. That was the vision. That has always been part of my research, and we have been putting out there, in the years and the minds of the nation.
And you want to draw it home again by what? By 2030, you said?
By 2020, tourism must become our number one contributor to our GDP.
Okay, you mean 2030, is that right?
2030,
okay.
Yes. 2030.
Tourism must become
the number one contributor to our GDP. The beautiful thing is that, in fact, let me give you a powerful example again. AU has got Agenda 2063, okay? But how many people have even heard about Agenda 2063? So visions and policies are nothing unless you have got people who show leadership. Leadership is by the B element that we need to be able to bring the change that we are looking for. Because if we don't do things differently, then we shouldn't be expecting a different result. If you cannot get people who think outside the box, who are able to walk and not just talk, who are able to form the right network, the right synergy, who are able to project knowledge backed by wisdom, backed by knowledge, backed by realities, then we will be in the arms of Leviathans and they will drown us. So we need to be able to clearly come out with the milestones. These are the things that we want to do year by year, get the right people to be able to be there for the evaluation, the monitoring, to be able to show that we are actually on course. And it's not going to happen because it's not going to happen unless we really look at what tourism is and what makes a destination an attractive one. And that is why we need, for example, how many rest stops do we have from the Cape Coast Elibo corridor? What rest stop do we have? On the Accra, Kumasi, we are happy to have Lindador. Is another one there? From Volta region, what kind of rest stop do we have? So we need to be able to really look at how do we create a memorable experience for our visitors by bringing in the right development. So rest stop, for example, is one of the things that we should be considering. I mean, there are others, all right? But for now, I would like to say that the right people must be put in place to be able to do the right research, the feasibility studies and all that taps into our comparative advantages based on the region, and to be able to see which ones are called the strategic 5. There must be about 5 strategic sites in the country that you just mention it in terms of the tangible tourism, that you mention it puts Ghana up there. What kind of branding? When I branded Ho as the oxygen city in Ghana, all right? People have not even asked me why did I say it and all that. They just went to EPA, this on this. But it was a whole concept I was thinking about when I said it in 2018, all right? Now is in the public domain, and I know they are doing some great things with it. But we must be able to go to the roots of some of them who came out with ideas to be able to see what are the things behind the curtain. What were you thinking when you were actually saying this?
So two quick interventions there, Prof, just before you continue. One, you're saying that you had to brand Ho as the oxygen city of Ghana. I'd like you to just give me one shot why you may have done that. And then secondly, you talked about, the infrastructure, let's say from Aflao, all the way to Elubo, and that's the West African Highway project. You know that a very big road infrastructural project is being undertaken, and yet you are saying that we do not have very significant number of rest stops on this highway, such that if we finished building these roads to the highway, the number one status and all that, and you are traveling from, let's say, Aflao all the way to Elubo so that you can enter into Cote d'Ivoire, maybe you are coming from Nigeria or from Benin or from Togo, we need to have these rest stops just so that it will facilitate some short stops, which would also bring some eyeballs onto some of the facilities that we have around that would ultimately, propel tourism. So these two quick comments, Oxygen City and then the rest stops, just a little elaboration over that.
Thank you very much. When you get to home, which is not too far away from Accra at all, a beautiful, beautiful place with historical significance, people with rich food heritage, all right? When you get to home, what really hit me at first, my background, one of my backgrounds is ecotourism, all right? So I got to Ho and I just realized that, this place, the air here is quite different. Look at the flora at the place. And look at the whole put within the whole ecosystems of the Volta region. You realize, and in fact, I did not only even say Ho as the oxygen city. I said the whole Volta region is also the oxygen destination of Ghana. They forget to add that one as well.
The oxygen destination of Ghana.
The oxygen destination of Ghana, or the oxygen region
and
of
the
Ghana.
reason?
And the reason is that besides even the ambience and all that, okay, oxygen, what does it do to the body? Is what we actually take it in, just like the plant taking the carbon dioxide, all right? I saw vivacity, the people, their smiles, their hospitality, the food and everything. I realized that Ghana can get a good renewal from the place as well, besides all the greenery, all right? So it cuts across from the biological, the cultural, the ecological, to the very soul of the people at the Volta region.
So not just the oxygen Opia Eshen went to breathe in Ho, the Volta region, but he also saw the smile. I hope you came back to Cape Coast safe and sound.
Say it again, bro.
I hope, after seeing and appreciating the smile of the people, the reception of the people, the conviviality, as you would describe them, I hope you got back to Accra safe and sound.
I can read between the lines of what we are saying. Yes.
No lines drawn here. Opia, let me just take the opportunity to go through two messages that have come through. It's just 8 minutes to the top of the hour, and very soon we'll be wrapping up on Business Breakfast on Zed BBZ on Zed 101.9, your lifestyle, leisure, and business platform. Two messages. One from Chris Islegon, and he says, most of the roads leading to our tourist destination are in very bad state, and it is hindering our tourism. This is what Chris says. That's number one. Number two, and this is coming from Michael Tessano. He says that the high cost of living, especially in our hospitality sector, is killing tourism and really needs to be checked. In 2 minutes, Opia, bad roads, the high cost of our hospitality facilities.
It's true. It's true. My first time, to Morocco was just this year. And I can tell you for a fact, from Casablanca to Rabat, which is their capital, I've lived a lot of my life in UK, all right? But I was amazed as well, the polished nature of the roads. And I was asking myself, look at these two big cities, all right? Connected by roads so beautifully. Why can't you do that for ourselves? You see? So I am all for the express road that the president of the land now is talking about, connecting, for example, Accra to Kumasi. Because that is how you actually create more experience on the way.
That you mean
Nobody
the big
wants to-
push project by His Excellency John Dramani Mahama?
It's the right thing. It's the right thing to do. I was in Orlando. I traveled to Miami, and for about 7 hours drive, it was a beautiful thing. And now, just by way of this, when you go to US, for example, they brand all the cities. If you go to Las Vegas, they say whatever happens in Las Vegas must stay in Las Vegas. I was in Daytona. Their beach there is not anything beautiful than Labadi.
I thought you were going to say you were in Ekwapim, Ekropon. You are talking about places that I haven't heard about before, Opian.
Yes,
well, Kofi Anor on Facebook. Opian, just 1 second. Just 1 second. Kofi Anor on Facebook says, "Good show, Zed. You guys are great." Well, what else can we do if you have Professor Gabriel Ishen speaking to tourism on Z101.9 FM? What else can you do? You want to stick and stay. Opia, enough of the names you are mentioning. Come down to our cinema and come to Ekropon. Come to my holy village and the wonderful things that you can find there. Yes.
You go to every year.
Excellent.
Every
Every.
Oh, but let me just land on this.
Please do.
They
Please
give
do.
The governors of the places, they give names to the place that make the place attractive. So Florida would say Sunshine State, okay? And I'm just saying that what is the name for every?
So you did it for who? The Oxygen City, right?
Yes. So why can't we brand every? I was in every as if I was in a foreign land. I had to put on my car heater in 2020. The whole every is a tourism gold mine. Eh?
Excellent. Opia, the high cost of our hospitality facilities.
Yes, every nation has a way in which, just like you go to airport and you are buying a bottle of water, okay? And then the price is different from when you are outside. The cost that we have in the hospitality, the restaurant and all the hotels, it's a reflection of the economy that we have. And with time, as we pick up more and more in terms of our economy, the prices will adjust accordingly. But again, the caveat here is that you cannot pay for something expensive and then the service is no. And that is why, if it is expensive, then let's give a matching service to it. So that people will say that, yes, this thing is expensive, but boy, the value and the quality are so much in tandem with the amount of money that we pay for.
And it's difficult to say same of the facilities that we have in Ghana here. And this is something that we should be looking at.
1 hour, the food is not in. When you go there and people are looking at your face as
service quality. This is a discussion we definitely must have again on Z101.9 FM. But Opia, just before we go, because we've got less than 3 minutes to go. Now, you are an expert when it comes to digital marketing as well, and the role of the influencers, social media, and all that. I mean, you have heard about the, I call it the Aisha visit, but the I show speed, not Aisha speed, the I show speed, visit to Ghana and the followers that it has brought. There were other comments that came, people were not too excited about, the other things, including the passport saga and all that kind of thing. But for me, we're looking at tourism, we're looking at its attractions, we're looking at how we can sell it. What is your brief comment on this I Show Speed tour of Africa, particularly to Ghana?
Two things I want to highlight.
Yes.
The first, as a Pan-Africanist, let me talk about the first. The first is what I call the digital decolonization. Digital decolonization is how she was able to portray Africa with all its dynamics in a way that those who have been feeding on the negative representations of Africa, for them to see the real Africa. So he contributed so tremendously, cleansing the minds of people from the miseducation and the misrepresentation that they have. So his contribution to digital decolonization is really enormous. Second is that we are in the era of digital. And whoever doesn't want to go in this direction want to be a dinosaur. And that is why you look at 500 million plus people viewing it. You know, in Ghana alone for the 8 hours or so, like 4.8 million people watch it. This is the beauty of what digitization can do for us as a people. It is more than even going to pay huge money on Fox News, CNN, and what have you. The country must really look in terms of the tourism, must come out with a tourism strategy, a digital strategy as soon as practicable. And we see how we can use the influencers like Maya and all that. All these, the other guys, they are all great. And they are all so much willing to do something for the country. But we need to be able to really not just be tourism ambassadors for people who just want to be ambassadors to themselves and not to their constituents and to the global community. We need to be able to really select the right people with the right connections to be able to create the right reverberations in the ecosystem that we want to create. Because a country can gain more leverage these days in the era of the internet and position themselves in the minds and the hearts of the global visitors, be they actual visitors or potential visitors. And that is what Ghana must be thinking about. The tourism digitization strategy must be worked on as soon as practicable.
The tourism digitization strategy, which will propel Ghana onto the rightful pinnacles of development, is what Professor Gabriel Ishen says this morning. This is where we are drawing the curtains on today's discussions on what tourism can bring to a nation, the impact of the activities if well planned. And he's just ended by saying that we don't close, we don't stop at eye-show speed. Let's be very deliberate about it, and this country shall see all the glorious things. Opia, on behalf of Zed, we say yadasa ne pay yang krumpon kwerampon unsho. Wherever you find yourself, let us think about Ghana and do the right things, and I believe that it shall be well. We'll be talking to you in a very short while later, bringing us much more insights on Zed 101.9 FM. Good people out there, it's 10 a.m. and on behalf of the regular host, the production crew, the technical members, this has been Nana Safo Kantanka saying good morning to you. And you want to believe in yourself, believe in Ghana, believe in Africa, and all as well. Next on your radio, your dial 101.9 FM is The Brighter Side with Jeremy Okorie Amwako. Stepping out for today.